We were intimately aware of the sort of the processes behind the bounty. We knew what it took to produce food. We understood the importance of good soil and water quality. We understood the importance of a balance between sunshine and rain, the importance of timing. We understood how hard it was to produce food. We understood the value of food because we saw what went into it. Today, it's very difficult to find that kind of awareness among the average citizen. We're simply so detached. For more and more of us, food really is produced in a grocery store. It is. I mean, we know. We go to school. They tell us there are farms. We've seen them. Some of us may have actually worked on them. But more and more of us, it's not a reality. It's something we see in documentaries, and some guy comes and talks to you at the symposium and tells you. But the truth is, it's harder and harder to make that real. And the problem is, it's because we're consumers. We've been changed over time into consumers. And think about what consumers mean. I mean, does anyone else find that as an insulting term, to be thought of as a consumer? I mean, I thought we were Americans. I thought we were citizens. I thought we were people. I thought we were brothers and sisters, family members. But no, it turns out we're consumers. Think about what the word consumer means. It means passive acceptance. You passively accept what is produced for you. And what it means in terms of food is that you're not just taking the product, you're accepting the story that goes with that product because you don't have any way to challenge the story. So if the maker of a breakfast cereal tells you that this is part of this nutritious breakfast, it must be. Never mind that it's more than 50% sugar. If they tell you that it has the right balance of nutrients, that it's low fat or no fat, has the right fiber, you pretty much have to accept it because you don't have any way to verify it. You're so completely separated, disconnected from the actual means of production. Not to get all Marxist here, but this is the position we find ourselves in. So the trick is to stop being consumers. The trick is to turn that around, move back to taking more of a producer role. Because we're designed, humans are designed to make things. We're not designed just to consume. We're designed to create. And they do study after study where they show that people are the happiest when they're making things. They're more content when they're making things. Just being a passive consumer leads to aggression, usually passive aggression. But it eventually shows up. So we need to find a way to turn ourselves back into producers. Well, how do we do that in terms of food? Do we all become farmers? Some of us will. And 10 years ago, if someone had asked me, how do we become producers? Should we become farmers? I'd say it'll never happen. We've all moved off the land. We're all back in the cities. We don't know how to farm. The people that came from farming families are tired of farming because farming is so hard. It's not remunerative. And more of us have never had any connection. It just won't happen. And it turns out it is happening. There are people all over this country, and in the world, in fact, who are forsaking careers in finance, in law, engineering, to do what? To farm. And these are not people from farming families. These are folks who know nothing about farming and are having to educate themselves. And they're going back and they're producing food. Sometimes they're just producing food for themselves. Sometimes they're producing food for farmers' markets. But they're producing. It's incredible. It's still a very small movement. I mean, we're talking fractions of a percent in terms of the total food supply. But it's happening. And you can see evidence of it everywhere. Now, some of it's very traditional. They're out there in the country growing things. In some cases, it's very sort of new wave. You have a lot of this thing called urban horticulture, where people are growing food in the cities. Again, 10 years ago, this was, you maybe grew food in a pot in your window. Now people are growing things on rooftops. They have community gardens. There's a couple of grad students out of California that have this great idea called Sky Vegetables, where they want to grow vegetables on top of grocery stores. Because you've got all these acres of rooftop that aren't being used, and it's hydroponic, so there's no dirt involved, so there's not much of a weight issue. And they figure they could grow tons and tons of this stuff right on top of the grocery store, and I don't think it gets any fresher than that. And this is really starting to have appeal. They think you could actually make money doing this. You can't do it all year round. You couldn't do it in every part of the country, but the point is you could begin bringing production back closer to the people. There are ideas like this percolating everywhere. It's what's so exciting. People are starting, they're tired of the way the system is, but instead of just complaining like I do, they're actually getting out there and doing things. And it's not just one idea, it's thousands, it's millions of ideas. I mean, when we used to farm, all of us, there were millions of ideas percolating from millions of farmers. Every farm was essentially an experiment where people tried different things. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. We've lost a lot of that as we've industrialized our farm system. We're regaining that. We're taking that back again as these sort of new age farmers begin the experiment again. Now, of course, we all can't be farmers. I understand that. But we all do need to get back into producing again. So how can we do that? The easiest way is cooking. I know it sounds really corny, and I'm sorry to get all Martha Stewart on you, but the truth is that we've stopped cooking in this country, and we identified that as progress. We said that's a good thing. And, you know, for the fact when the housewife typically was the person with most of the responsibility for the cooking, when it was 4 hours a day, being able to reduce that time was absolutely progress. But we've gone so far the other way now that we've taken away this very vital function. Think about what cooking is. It's producing, it's putting together something, and it's usually for someone that you know, maybe someone even that you love or care about. It's the most human and intimate thing you can do in many cases. Cooking a meal for someone is incredible. Cooking a meal for a group, I mean, get out of here. And yet, fewer and fewer of us have that experience. I mean, think about this. You know, when I grew up, and a lot of us grew up, the household, the dining room table was where the family built itself. That's where the family was constructed. That's where we hashed things out. That's where arguments were settled. That's where people checked in. That's where identities were formed, at the dining room table. And now we have families that don't have any dining room table time because they're so busy with their after-school schedules and they're this and they're that. And yes, we're busy. And the food industry has obliged by creating mini meals so that now a busy mom can produce 5 different meals that can be eaten at 5 different times. That's super convenient. That's great. We never see each other. And if you think that you can go through life without the interaction that came traditionally from the making of food together, if you think you can get through life and not miss that in some deep way, you're mistaken. It is absolutely essential, and it's something we're giving up. We're giving up in the name of progress. We're saying we're too busy. Now, if you go to France still, a lot of places in Europe, they look at us and they say, you're insane. You know, they don't think of it as eating if you eat by yourself. You know, this idea of eating in the car, we think that's progress. I mean, and just as a sideline, in Washington State, you can't you can't use your cell phone while driving. Is that the case here? No, of course not. It's Texas. So, all right. So instead you have to use an earpiece, right? Which frees up your hand for what? The big breakfast burrito that you can be eating while, you know, holding the drink, and you're driving and shifting. Okay, and that's somehow safer than talking on the cell phone, you know? I mean, give me a break. But we're so, you know, the food industry's totally targeted the food, the car, as this sort of the next sphere of eating. You know, think about the cup holder. I mean, what a bizarre idea. Of course it makes sense. But I mean, if you take sort of a traditional, sort of a European idea, and I'm not extolling the European model entirely by any means. They have lots and lots of problems. I mean, give me a break. But I do share some of their sympathy when they look at our system and they say, that is not food. That is not food. And we're giving that up. So finding ways to restore that. I mean, you can't cook, you know, every night. I understand that people are busy. People say, look, I'm working 1, maybe 2 jobs, and in these times you don't want to do anything that threatens your job, absolutely. And you've got kids, and you've got school, you know, you don't have time. Okay, I understand that, but somehow in America, we're still finding 3.5 hours every day to do what? Watch TV. Yes, you know, when something's important, you make time for it. And I know TV's important. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff on there, you know. There's cooking shows, for Pete's sake. But, you know, if we're going to be serious, about sort of reorienting ourselves around a more sustainable and human food system, we're going to have to change our priorities. We have to make time to do cooking. People say, I don't know how to cook. You can learn. I guarantee you, you know, there are some people that I'm talking to right now that are saying, I always cook. What's he talking about? Fine. There are a lot of people here who stopped cooking or are afraid to cook. You know, it's a skill. And I guarantee you, you know, guys, you know, if you don't think that gals think that's romantic to be able to cook for them, I'll tell you what, it's essential, all right? You know, women these days appreciate guys that are handy in the kitchen. They don't look at a kitchen and just, you know, think it's a foreign country. Or so I'm told. All right. You know, so we're talking about food as sort of functional. We're talking about food as sort of emotional, maybe even spiritual. I think the last thing that we need to recover in our food is that spiritual side. And by spiritual, I mean the notion of sacrifice. Now, what do I mean by sacrifice in terms of food? I mean, we're in the land of bounty. What would we have to sacrifice? Well, if you think about how we used to view food, we used to sit down. Like my grandma, whenever we sat down for dinner, she would always say, I wonder what the poor folks are eating tonight. And she was making 2 points. The first was that she'd grown up poor, and she was declaring the fact that she wasn't poor, that didn't matter. that she was eating quite well and other people weren't doing as well. But she was also, as importantly, she was checking in with those other people. She was making us aware that there were others around us. The act of, one of the traditional ways of approaching food is an act of sharing. It's one of the reasons the Europeans kind of say you can't eat food by yourself, because food is about sharing. Mealtime is about sharing. You are breaking bread with someone to share with them. And eating alone makes that pretty hard. But it's not just with your family. You're not just sharing with your family or your friends. You're sharing with your community. You're thinking. You're connecting to the community. Let me ask you a question. When a community member dies, if you're from a small town, what do people do? They show up at, what do they bring? This is how we take care of one another, with food, explicitly with food. And we don't question this. We don't say, geez, do I have time? Can I tape that show and then bring them? No. We do this thing, bringing back that spirit. When I grew up, there were all these commercials, and they said, skip or reduce 1 meal a week and use the savings, donate the money that you save to these groups that were working overseas, dealing with famine overseas. And the idea was, it's very traditional. It's the idea that you want to, as Americans became aware that everyone didn't share their great bounty, that there were problems, part of the food experience was about reconnecting with the rest of the world and making sure that before you enjoyed your meal, you were at least taking steps to ensure that other people could at least enjoy something approaching that. Being connected globally. And we're sort of pulling back from that. Because think about it, in a society that empowers individuals to take care of their own needs so efficiently, so that you don't have to have a family to cook for or to cook for you. You can just produce, you can pop everything in a microwave. You don't need to rely on your neighbors, your community. You don't need to check in with anybody. You can just eat. In a society like that, it's very easy to lose sight of the rest of the world, to stop thinking. And yet, what we have to do is reconnect. We have to be willing to make that sacrifice. We have to be willing maybe to skip a meal, to eat less, and actually take that contribution and send it on to a family or a part of the world that needs it. And you're kind of thinking, boy, that's just, I don't know if I can, that's so strange. Well, it's not strange. I mean, how many people here, I want to ask you a question. How many people here think that you're here because someone in your family or community made a sacrifice so you could get here? I mean, how many people think that someone they know made a sacrifice to help you be here? Okay, so it happens. It happens. It happens. It's ongoing. So here's the next question. What's going to be your sacrifice? What are you going to do for the next generation? And I think one thing we all can do is to start thinking differently about food. Because I guarantee you, if we don't, the next Krost Symposium that's on food 10 years from now, it's going to be a very dismal theme. I guarantee you. If we don't get on these things, and not just fixing it with the next technology, not just fixing it with the next chemical, fixing it with a new attitude. That's what I'm talking about. So I want to thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so a really good question to everyone here. Okay, so the idea is, we produce a lot of extra food, and we've sort of traditionally sent a lot of that surplus. We've used it to feed the world. And the problem is that surplus comes on unethical terms. And I think what is critical is to rethink our whole notion of aid. I mean, we've spent almost a century where aid is this. It's basically taking our surplus, what we don't need, and sort of making it available to the rest of the world. And instead, what really needed to be happening was finding ways to help countries that were hurting, that were food insecure, to become food secure themselves. Now, we've gone through several iterations of this where we say, okay, well, we'll ship them, instead of shipping them food, we'll ship them fertilizers, we'll ship them pesticides. And it hasn't always worked out really well. We need to find models of food production that work for those parts of the world. The challenge is that that's much harder than simply shipping the surplus. It's much easier to ship the surplus. And, as important, it's really hard to tell farmers at home, no, we were paying you to produce a surplus, now we're not going to do that. Politically, it's very tough. And every time we try it, and we just got done trying and failing a few years ago, every time we tried to sort of reform the federal subsidy system, the system that sort of pays farmers to overproduce, farmers have such clout politically that they keep the reform from happening.